Attention, all entrepreneurs and marketing mavens. Discover how you are a media company is more than just a statement. It's a new business reality. Gresham Harkless Jr. reveals how embracing your media identity is essential for success in today's digital world. Uncover strategies to enhance visibility, drive engagement, and transform your outreach efforts. If you want to leverage digital platforms to skyrocket your business, this episode is a can't miss.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show, where you will discover how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. Paul Guyan, the mastermind behind the Lead Machine, introduces you to trailblazers who inspire you to implement life-changing solutions and systems you can model to nurture your leads and get your offers seen by your ideal clients who will invest in themselves and you. Be sure you visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, tune in and get ready to transform your vision into reality.
So welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyan, your host, Lead Machine Coach, and the founder of the Lead Machine Marketing Agency and Mastermind. I'm dedicated to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. And whether you're just starting out or wanting to take your business to the next level, let's get this conversation started and turn your dreams into reality. Gresham, or Gresh W. Harkless Jr. founded Blue 16 Media and CB Nation. Blue 16 Media uses media and technology to change lives. These media properties include Blue 16 Marketing, a digital marketing agency that provides digital marketing services, including web design, website support, and SEO services. And then CB Nation consists of media properties like blogs, podcasts, and videos to help businesses in the community succeed. Central to Blue 16's marketing philosophy is that, again, you are a media company, and every organization is in the media business and can strategically leverage marketing tools, platforms, and ingredients to reach its goals. Gresh is a proud graduate of Howard University and Georgetown University. In 2022, he was selected as 50-plus Black marketer on the rise in the influencer and media innovations category. Congratulations. He's also graduated from the 2020 Leadership Center for Excellence Young Professionals program in 2016, and he was recognized as 40 under 40 in Northern Virginia in 22 and in Alexandria in 2020. He's recorded over 1,600 podcast episodes of the I Am CEO podcast and shared 100 plus business lessons that he has learned from recording the episodes in the I Am CEO Handbook, Volume 3. So Gresh, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you could come today.
Oh, super excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So your statement that everyone should be, that every company should be a media company. What is that? How did you arrive at that? And why is that essential for businesses today?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I say, you are a media company. I mean that for organizations, individuals, largely because it's been like the, culmination of many different things that have happened. I consider media being simply the transference of kind of information. Of course, we always look at media around social media. So you can think of your TikToks, your LinkedIns, your Facebooks. But I also consider media being like your website. I consider you having a one-on-one conversation with somebody being media because you're transferring that content and information. So I have a lot more of a broader definition related to media. But I think when we start to look at it from that perspective, we realize that we all are in the media business in some form, shape, or fashion. And for me, I always go back to when I was 10 years old. I started a family newspaper because my dad was in the military. He went to an entirely different country. We didn't have all these snazzy tools that we have now to connect with each other instantaneously. So I hopped on Microsoft Word. I put some clip art into that, and I used to cover all the things that were going on in our family. So think TMZ for your family. And I call that my first media company because at that time I was quote unquote solving a problem. At 10 years old, I was able to get information to my dad to know about everything that was going on in our family. And also I was able to kind of sell the subscriptions at that age to people that were curious around our family or within our family. Yeah. So That's a lot of where that seed was planted. But, fast forward a lot of years, I've always been interested and I always felt like I was a journalist at heart. And I feel like having medias like podcasts and blogging and blogs to be able to kind of share and provide value for the clients and customers you want to work with is integral. So that's a little bit about like how it started. And, I feel like I've just tried to run with it from there.
Yeah, that's interesting that you had media so on your mind at such an early age. Did you actually make money with that?
Made a little bit, made a little. I sold a subscription, so I made a little bit. I wasn't, Rockefeller on the Forbes list or anything like that, but
Yeah.
I made a little bit to get some candy and things like
Well, at 10 years old, having money come in for candy,
that.
that's amazing. I can't imagine that. So when I think of media, I agree with you. I think that media are just simply different channels that you can use or leverage to get your message across. And all of those that you mentioned uh, were not necessarily owned. Like your podcast is owned. And I'd like to mention that email is a super important channel that you do own and something that you should, from all your media exposure, you should be leveraging to build that email list. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I love that you said that, Paul, because a lot of times you touched on it where I say when you look at building your media company, you start to look at it and you figure out there's lots of different platforms and opportunities out there.
Mhm.
And I think there's pros and cons of each. One of the things, just like you said so well, is I really think people have to understand what they quote unquote own and they don't own. And that could have huge ramifications on the success of your strategy long term if you don't realize that you don't necessarily own the outreach that you get on social media platforms, for example. It doesn't mean you don't necessarily use them, but you just kind of understand what they are for and what they can do. So a platform such as, I like to call them ingredients, such as
Yeah,
email marketing is a great way. And I always say, like, if I was to kind of go back to square one, the biggest thing I would always try to get information of for anybody that's potential clients and customers is their name, email address, and their phone number, because no
yeah,
matter what platforms you're going to use in the future, more than likely you're going to be able to contact people in that way. So I believe like email, where it might be, overlooked, is one of the most powerful ways to kind of get connections, build relationships, and of course, be able to get your media company started.
right. And so, what are some of the foundational elements, or as you call them, ingredients that every business should integrate to function effectively as a media company? And how do these components change the way that you approach marketing?
Yeah, I think before I usually say you even get started, you start to pop in and look at the ingredients. The first thing I say you want to do is answer three questions. These three questions are impactful because they do help you as the quote unquote ingredients evolve. They change. They add additional things into what they're doing, and those three foundational questions, I should say, really revolve around your target market, and your
Mhm.
target market can be, the age, the location, if they have 2.5 dogs or 4.5 kids or whatever that might be,
Mhm.
painting the picture of who that is that you're trying to target. But understand that you can drill down a lot more. At the heart of like what we try to do as quote unquote entrepreneurs and business owners is to try to provide transformation and support and solve a problem for the audience and the avatar, the people that you're trying to serve. So don't forget about like drilling down to the whole psychology of your avatar, of your target market. What's keeping them up at night? What transformation are you truly providing? And the reason I bring that up is because the more information that you know about that and you continue to learn that information, it's going to evolve and change. Especially if you have an ideal client that you're working with. And as you're working with, 10, 15 years sometimes, if you're a
Mhm.
financial planner, for example, their needs are going to evolve and change. So you want to make sure that when you're creating media, you're creating content, you're using and leveraging the ingredients, you're really paying attention to that. So that's why you want to, of course, know that now as much as you can, but you want to continue to know more and more about it because it can ultimately evolve and change. The next question I would say, make sure you know ultimately what and how you define success. If you're an e-commerce brand, you're going to define success in a completely different way than if you have a home improvement company and you're trying to serve your local community. So you might want people to continue to kind of come through your door virtually and buy your product or service and not necessarily have a conversation with you, or you might have a chat bot or something like that where you're answering all those questions. That may not work for your local home improvement contractor. That may not work for your local plumber where they have an emergency and they want to talk to somebody immediately. So understanding like how you define success, what that looks like is gonna, evolve depending on how you structure your business, what you want to do, and ultimately what that looks like. So make sure that you understand and are clear about how exactly you define that success. And then one of the other really big impactful things you want to know is the resources. And so many times resources people flock to what's my budget, how much money am I spending, and so on and so forth. But also don't forget about how important time is. Time could be your most valuable resource. So I use say time and money. And depending on where you are in the journey, you might be in more startup mode where you're using more quote unquote sweat equity to be able to
Yeah.
get things going versus later on in the business. So I think those three foundational questions are huge because even that question, as you answer it, as you start to get clients and customers, you might have more within your budget. So you are able to hire an expert. So it might determine like what ingredients you end up choosing for that. So I think those are really impactful questions to ask and answer, and to continue to kind of check in on.
Yeah, and so there are some things come to mind and said, okay, there are people that are in startup mode that are listeners here, and there are also people who are, in our audience that have some traction. They've got customers, and a lot of times many times you end up saying, "Oh, I'm going to take that job," and it happens to all of us where we are presented with an opportunity and we go, "Oh, I really want that deal." You can't have every deal, and a lot of times that opportunity might be something outside of your wheelhouse. So I think a good statement is stay in your lane, and knowing what success is like helps you do that, helps you guide what kind of jobs you're going to take, because not every customer is going to be your ideal customer, and you want to work in your sweet spot of things that you want to do and you can do and you do well, and that support that success model that you just mentioned. That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah. So, what are some of and are there some tools or some ways that we can uncover those three questions to help us with research? I mean, it's a lot easier to find out information about everyone. Privacy is out the window these days, but there are some really great tools and strategies that you can use to mine that information to inform your decisions. What are some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. And I often say, even on my show, I say, don't forget about the human part of business and the human part of life at that. I think you made such a powerful point where sometimes we're looking for who's our ideal client or customer, who do we want to work with? And if you have had that ideal client or customer, maybe you start there. Maybe you start to mine
Mhm.
the information and start to survey, for lack of a better term, and do research into understanding your ideal clients and who they are that you've already been working with, because you may start to create that avatar specifically for the clients you worked with. But I say, even if you're just getting started and you don't have a client, you don't have an idea of who exactly that is, maybe you have an idea of who you worked with well in the past, or who you would want to work well with in the past. I think one of the things about the journey that you go on for entrepreneurship, and definitely in marketing, is you start to refine exactly who you want to work with. And it sometimes, unfortunately, happens by trial and error where you make those mistakes and you're like, I shouldn't have worked with that person. And
Mhm.
sometimes you might have already known that, but you continue to refine that so you know exactly, what and who that looks like. But don't, neglect the opportunity to be able to send out surveys, to send out get a net performer promoter score for your ideal clients and customers that you're working with or potentially want to work with. Because the more information you have, the more information it's going to help out. But that market research is such a huge thing that you want to make sure you leverage. But I think it becomes really difficult depending on where you are in the stage, because when you say yes to something, you're automatically saying no to something else, as you said so well. So you want to make sure that you are having your ideal clients and customers coming through as much as possible. So you want to drill down and learn as much as you can about who they are, what makes them tick, what might be keeping them up at night, so that you can ultimately provide, those services for them.
Right. And that leads me to the idea of content. So if you're going to create content, we talked about that. you had an ideal at 10, you had an idea, you had the ideal audience. In fact, you knew everything about them because you were part of that family. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes you are your ideal client, which is really, really handy. But you are creating content that aligns well with what their interests were. So can you talk about some of the strategies that you would use for content creation that would help you stay in your lane and attract those ideal clients?
Yeah, a lot of what you do kind of goes back to those three questions. So you've answered those questions. And anytime I say you're trying to determine what platforms, what content you're trying to create, make sure you're going back to those three questions because you're always going to be able to test and experiment with different options, but you want to be really dialed in with your ideal client and customer. If you know like this keeps them up at night, then you know that providing a solution to that, even just in your content, is going to help make their lives better. So you want to make sure you gear on that. A lot of times I compare like building your media company to figuring out whatever your favorite dish is. And I always go to my mom's sweet potato pie because it's one of my absolute favorites,
Mm,
but there's chocolate cake, there's pineapple cake. There's so many different things. So kind of just envision what that is and what that looks like. And you go to the grocery store and you figure out what ingredients are going to help you to build that ultimate dessert that you want to have. That's the way that you want to approach your marketing. When you want to approach your content, you're thinking of, okay, everybody's listening to the same station, which is what's in it for me, WIIFM.
yeah.
So you want to make sure that you're coming into their lives so that you can provide value for them. And the reason that you want to kind of go to the grocery store and get those ingredients and look at what they are, and by ingredients, I mean literally the platforms that you're using to be able to get that content out there, you know that there's pros and cons of each. Like we were just talking about, if you're going to use a platform like TikTok, like as we're talking now, that may be a little bit more kind of risky to use versus using YouTube or using or optimizing your website with Google. So you want to kind of understand like what all the ingredients are. And then you want to kind of start to say, okay, I know this platform. I know it is its own kind of language. So this is how I'm going to communicate on that platform, but you never ever want to lose sight of why you're doing that, which is to provide value for your ideal clients and customers. So as you start to develop that content strategy and what that looks like, make sure that you're keeping top of mind exactly like what it is that is going to improve their lives. For me at 10, it was like, how can I get the juiciest information about what's going on in the family so that I can get more subscriptions? So you want to approach it in the exact same way.
Yeah. And you had me at pie.
There you
When you said sweet potato pie, I was going, huh? Yeah.
go.
So I think another thing that that I'd like to know a little bit more about is that when you create content, you need to create it for people who are ready to buy, who don't even know you yet, and who are maybe deciding, or they might not even know that they have a problem yet, and they might have sort of been searching out there. So you have to have a kind of a wide net, and with all the options that are available, and you mentioned knowing the platform, isn't it smart to know to stick with one platform and get something that works and then expand from there with that content?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to continue with the pie analogy, Paul, since you loved it. And I'm saying if you're making sweet potato pie, I always say, you don't want to go to the grocery store and get, ketchup at that time, at least, not for that specific dish. I don't want ketchup in my sweet potato pie. I
No.
don't know about you, Paul, but that's not necessarily going to be good for me. So I think it's so important to kind of have that understanding of what exactly you're trying to create because you are going to pick one, maybe two of the platforms to own deeply, to know deeply, and to make sure that you're always abreast of those changes, those opportunities. And I feel like that's even the case if you do decide to hire an outside consultant or an agency or whatever that looks like, because it's going to give you that opportunity to go a little bit deeper, to make a little bit more of a transformation. And as noisy as these platforms are, as noisy as it is in the world, to go further, a lot of times you go that extra mile. And going that extra mile means you're not focusing on all the things. You're focusing on that one thing because you know it's going to provide that transformation and opportunity for your clients and customers. The reason I usually say two, max three, is because you never ever want to stop experimenting. Just
Mhm.
because just I'll go back to the ketchup analogy. Just because I say that I don't want ketchup, it doesn't mean that there might be some type of ketchup that might work well in that pie. So all that means is that, hey, this is a platform that your ideal clients are not on. They're not using. but it doesn't mean that they won't be using it in a year. It doesn't mean they won't be using it in 5 years. So as you start to kind of spend time there, you start to know it, experiment a little bit, not spend all your time, but some of your time. You can be what they a lot of times call on social media platforms first movers. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of advantage to being the first mover on certain platforms because there's people that were on platforms like Vine that are still enjoying the fruits of those platforms because they moved first and they moved to other platforms first and they built that community and that connection over time. So, don't hesitate or be resistant to experimenting as well too.
Yeah, and TikTok is one of those platforms that's really very popular with younger people. And I just had a guest on earlier that he's 51, and people were, the younger people who follow him and the companies that he is speaking with and teaching, they are saying, "Hey, you need to be on this platform." And finally, after about a year and a half, he finally is out there and sharing content, and it's working. So that's important. Now, you mentioned the sweet potato pie. Let's go back to that. When when you're creating a sweet potato pie, I believe that the more fresh and authentic and maybe organic, even clean foods that you use in that recipe make it so much better. And so, how is authenticity and transparency? Is that important in your content creation these days, or are we trying to trick our audience into becoming clients?
No, and I think that you're right on. I love that. I agree with you 110,000% that the more fresh and kind of you that you are within your content, the more you're going to be able to resonate with people. And that's why I said you never want to forget about the part that you're kind of just transferring content and information to somebody. It's ultimately these all are conversational tools. The way that you can help to get that media out there, talk about what it is that you do. So I feel like another great way, like you said, to know the platform is a really great opportunity, but to be yourself, I often say if you run your own race, you can't lose. And that means you have to know what your race is. You have to know what is your secret sauce, what sets you apart, what is your superpower. And the more you show up as that, the less likely people are to try to emulate their they might try to, but they are not going to do it successfully because they're not yourself. And I think that it wasn't so much the case in years prior, but it's becoming more and more evident where people are craving this opportunity for that human connection. They're craving the content that can actually help them on a day-to-day basis. They want to know somebody, they want to know they're not the only person that's going through this issue or this problem. So the more that we share that, the more that we share our journey and what that looks like, the opportunity for connection is going to be tremendous. But I think you have to really do that from an authentic standpoint because in this day and age, it's getting harder and harder to quote unquote hide behind facades or hide behind things that
Yeah,
aren't real. And people will find you out as we see that sometimes online. That authenticity is going to be such a huge thing. And it always go back to the quote, Paul. It's like be yourself because everybody else is already taken. So why not do that?
yeah,
Because everybody
yeah.
wants you to be who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. And after the pandemic, when we went to the remote work and having conversations like we're having, it's so much easier to connect with people. And it's and you I might have a background behind me and so do you, but everything the way we talk, the way we stutter, or we're not perfect. And I think people that curtain has been pulled back, and I think people do crave it, and they really do want to have a human connection. Which brings me to the idea of how can this media company help with outreach? So we're doing cold outreach to people to bring them into the fold to to try to get them to get more customers. There's that need for outreach. I mean, obviously we've got the inbound methodology of creating content and things like that, but there's also the need for, especially in certain kinds of businesses, there needs to be outreach.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with code outreach and reaching out to people, we kind of have to approach it in the very much so the same way that you can approach like a social media strategy. The reason I say that is because a lot of times on social media, you're not necessarily searching for whatever it is you might be trying to provide to people. So the way that
Yeah.
I see that is you have to increase the value that you're providing. You're basically interrupting somebody in their day what they're doing, and you have to increase that value that you're trying to provide for them. As much as possible, of course, you want to, again, go back to that question: who am I targeting? Why am I targeting? What's keeping them up at night? And make sure that when you do provide value, it's value for them, not necessarily value for you. As much as possible, you want to try to create a win-win, but you really want to know the hearts and minds and the souls, even to some degree, of the people that you're trying to target. Because when you do that, when you do pop up, when you do try to provide them an opportunity to sign up for your email or join your email list or set up a consultation call, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're providing value. But keep in mind that, just like you understand all the pros and cons and ingredients, those strategies also may require you to do a lot more than you would if it was somebody coming through your door that was a little bit more of an inbound opportunity. So know that the volume might have to be there versus the inbound. But you again, you understand that, you understand what you're doing, and that's so huge. But just don't forget, like, value, 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 and know that value could be many things. It could be saving somebody's time. It could be making somebody laugh. It could be giving them a specific solution to help them, increase their relationship with somebody, or monopolize or maximize their time, whatever it might be. Just don't forget about that human part, because at the end of the day, people are trying to improve their lives in some form, shape, or fashion, and you want to send them, if you're coming to them completely cold, some type of transformation. How is this going to improve their lives? And I think if you start to look at it from that perspective, doesn't mean that everybody's going to say yes, everybody's going to become a client or customer. But at the end of the day, I think at the heart of what we all try to do from an entrepreneurial perspective is provide change and value. So I feel like even if you don't get the result that you want necessarily from that specific outreach, you still can be in alignment with who you are and what you ultimately stand for.
Yeah. And when we think about content, or rather content creation and outreach, uh, on top of delivering service and the day-to-day operations of a company, how can entrepreneurs, what kind of tools or what kinds of strategies can they do to make that maybe part of what they're already doing, or how do they make time to do it? There's got to be some tips that we can have, or tools that we can use to make things a little more effortless.
Absolutely, for people that are creating content and
Yeah,
information.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many tools out there, and again, everything is like, it depends. There's a pros and cons for each.
Mhm,
Of course, these social media platforms want you to spend as much time as possible, on those platforms,
mm,
posting everything natively, doing everything natively, and
mhm,
realize that that has a higher organic reach. But in reality, you're looking at your resources. You realize that you don't have all the time in the world. So
mhm,
maybe you do start to use platforms like Hootsuite, for example, and that allows you to schedule out social media platforms. Now, Meta has its own way to schedule out, social media. You can definitely do that. But understand that there's pros and cons of each. You can probably get a lot more things done, I should say, when you're using Hootsuite versus, posting natively on the site every single time. But no, you'll probably get a better organic reach and better engagement potentially by posting, natively. So look at that, related to all platforms. But one of the big things that's happening, especially with AI, is there a smorgasbord of
mm,
kind of tools that you can use to repurpose content. So one of the big things that I think people sometimes don't realize, when you create one piece of content, usually that piece of content is not one piece of content.
right.
Usually it could be 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 pieces of content. So
Mm,
taking a 30-minute long video, or maybe it's a webinar that you did, or maybe it's a talk that you did to just your dog and your wife and your kids or something like that. If you can record that, you can make that into reels. You can make that into a blog post. You can make that into a potentially a podcast, or you can send it out on X and tweet it on X, or X on tweet, or whatever you call it. You can do all these things to get your
yeah.
information out there, but you really want to think about, how do I take this pillar piece of content that's maybe a little bit more long form and be able to kind of repurpose it so it can reach more people. So there's there's platforms like Vizard.ai that you can use for that. Minova is another, one as well too, all you have to do is take a video and it will splice it up for you. But there's so many different platforms that are out there, and there's an influx of these AI, I think, powered softwares that allow you to be able to take that pillar piece of content and repurpose it very efficiently.
Yeah, and I think you just kind of hit the nail on the head with content creation. When we create content, really should be having a mindset of how, okay, I'm going to create this content that's number one, evergreen, so it can be used over and over and over again. And it also should be able to be uh, chunked down into other forms. So if you're a writer, your written content, your blog posts certainly can become a video. It can be an audio, and it can be clipped up into quotes and inspirational quotes and things like that. So you really need to be thinking like a media company if you think about Hollywood. We were talking about Hollywood with one of my previous guests, and they have trailers for their movies, and they have promotion plans that start way in advance before their launches. So you need to be thinking like a media company. And I think that I work with a client who's 15 million or so, and they were very hesitant to get into inbound marketing. And right now they're working with print, and they really need to branch out into using video, and they aren't doing podcasts, interviews, or anything like that. And I think a pitfall of every company or every entrepreneurs is like, it won't work for my company.
Right.
And that's just not true. And so what are some of the challenges and pitfalls that you've run into with your clients that you've had to maybe convince them or train them up and bring them up, because this is not going to go away. This is just getting faster and faster.
Yeah, I think that I hear very similar things with clients that we work with as well too. I always say, you don't want to get as attached to the how versus the why.
Yeah.
And the why is ultimately what's leading you to do the impactful things that you're doing. I think many times people get really attached to the how. I can't say the number of times that I hear from clients that I need to do this because I heard that I need to do this. And whatever this is, it could be TikTok, it could be print, it could be SEO, whatever it is, they're kind of stuck on that. And I think if you start to drill down a little bit more, you start to realize that there are other opportunities there, but people get really attached to like the how versus the why. Like the why is you ultimately want to make an impact. You want to reach more people so that you can have more impact and change more lives, have that transformation. But if you get attached to that how, what it's going to do is it may not necessarily affect you negatively in the beginning, but if you get stuck to that how, it could leave your business behind because as you said so well, things are changing and they're changing rapidly. So that's one of the big things that I find. The other big thing is that I talk a lot, again, around the ingredients, is that people don't really have a true understanding of the pros and cons of different ingredients and what they look like. They think that that just because they post something and just because they're there, that they're going to be able to drive home those opportunities. And they don't realize like it doesn't happen overnight. It does take a time. It does take strategy for those things to happen. So I think so many times we see those commercials and it makes it look like it's so simple, but in reality, there is a strategy behind it. There is the integration of who you are and who you're serving with being able to communicate on these platforms. So I think there's just a lot of misinformation and not a great kind of understanding of what marketing and branding and all those aspects look like. But I think, as much as possible, we try to just set those expectations because at the end of the day, we want to make sure our clients are as successful as possible and have an understanding of what that looks like.
Yeah. And speaking of successful clients, what are some of can you share an example of one of your clients who maybe said, "Oh, I'm not a media company, but hey, Gresh, tell me how it's done because I need to be better."
Yeah, I think a core of what we try to do is around SEO. And I feel like SEO, as much of it can be seen as an ingredient, I actually think it's a way to approach. It's kind of even a marketing philosophy to some degree,
Mm.
because the idea is that you're trying to be where people are. I always say, Wayne Gretzky says, "Don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where the puck's going to be," and that's a lot of what SEO is all about. So for one of our clients, we had um, a um a plumbing company that was based out of Ohio that didn't really have a lot of success with SEO in the past. And another big thing that happens is a lot of times people say that I tried that, it didn't work, so it doesn't work.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the agency, the company, the people that you work with necessarily did it the right way. Or maybe, there's a lot of factors around like
Hmm.
why that could be the case. Specifically for her and their company, they had a person that wasn't doing quality SEO services. So basically what they would do is they would take pages on the site and they would just copy those pages over and over again and just change the city and state on the site. So, there's not necessarily duplicate content per se, but it is duplicate content because you're copying the same content on your website. And what you're starting to see is that even with AI, the influx of AI content and information, Google is prioritizing value content. It's no different than what I talked about. Like, how are you providing value
Yeah.
for people's lives? So when you start to think about like that media company working with them, the first thing we looked at was the content. The first thing we looked at it was like, it's not just putting out things just for the sake of doing it to say, check, I have a page for this, I have a page for that.
Yeah.
How are you providing value? So a lot of what we were able to do is to kind of undo a lot of that bad SEO
Mhm.
that wasn't happening, and being able to kind of take more of a value-based mindset, asking who are you trying to target? What are those ideal clients and customers looking like? And what are they, what's keeping them up at night? Or is it emergency? Is it connections that you want to build? So we started to build a lot of those things within that content and information. And you start to see though that success with traffic on the website, of rankings, of course, which is of course important for SEO. But you start to do that because you don't necessarily say all the time that, hey, I want to be, I want you to be a media company, but you say that, hey, this is what's stopping you from getting you to where you are. And 9 out of 10 times, the media, the way you're approaching that, it could be the way that you're doing that. So that's just one of the clients that we kind of work.
Right. So yeah, SEO, that surprised me. But SEO is super, super important. It's not just important on your website, which, by the way, is one of those owned assets that you should definitely have. If you have just, we were looking for, we were going to lunch today, and our favorite place to go to lunch makes these amazing sandwiches, but they're closed on Mondays. But we didn't know that, so we were looking around town to say, okay, where else can we go? And my wife was looking for sandwiches. I don't know exactly what her search was, but she was disappointed that when she got to their listing on Google, she clicked on it and it took them to a Facebook page.
Mm.
Well, she's not actively on Facebook, and she didn't want to log into Facebook just to see their menu to find out what we could potentially order. So you don't control Facebook, you don't control LinkedIn, you don't control any of those platforms. There's huge value to connect with people on those platforms, but you really need to have that owned asset, so that, like we were talking about earlier, like your email database and your website. Those are two very, very critical things to have. I don't know where I was going with that, but the sandwiches that we got were great. I think you would have loved them, Gresh. It was
Hey,
a Italian zapper was the Italian sub that I got that was really, really good. So
that's
anyway,
that's one of my favorite sandwiches. So no, I think wherever you're going is the right place. But I do
yeah,
want to say one thing, and I love that you brought that up because at the heart of SEO, people forget about it's about user experience. When your
yeah,
wife clicked that link, she had a bad experience because
mhm,
she clicked and it didn't go to that own platform. It went to Facebook. It could have went to any other place that, that's a user experience. And like people forget, like before someone patronizes your business or your product or services, you're creating that experience before that happens. And that's a lot of what SEO is about. It's not about just keywords and doing backlinks. It's about experience. So when you don't have a good experience, people remember that and they won't patronize you. And they may even, say that this wasn't a great experience. So don't necessarily go and visit them. So you want to make sure that you are looking holistically at what that experience looks like.
yeah. And we did end up going to that restaurant because one of my clients, it's his brother who owns it, so
Ah,
we know that they have good food there. So
there you
so
go.
we were just disappointed that he didn't have a website.
Yeah.
And I said, "See, honey, this is exactly what I've been teaching people."
There you go. There's your opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, so I think we're about at the top of our time together. As we wrap up with your final words, Gresh, what are three things that our listeners, and our audience can do today to put these ideas into action?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that you can do is definitely make sure that you're having a conversation with your ideal clients and customers. Really know exactly as much as possible what helps that user experience. That sandwich shop should be having a conversation with Paul and his
Yeah,
wife and understanding exactly what is part of that experience because you start to uncover those things that can create a better experience, for people. So make sure that you are painting that picture so you know who exactly, you are that you're targeting. Depending on where you are in the journey, I say one of the best things that you can do to kind of learn as much as possible is to roll up your sleeves and just get started. So whether that is spending time on one of the unowned platforms, make sure that you do that. But make sure you understand that you don't own that platform. So whether it's LinkedIn or it's Facebook group or something along those lines, make sure that you're doing that. And then the third thing I would say is once you have an idea of who you're targeting, once you have an idea of what platform you want to kind of play on, for lack of a better term, find out if there is potential groups. Like I'm a big, huge proponent of building your media company, that whether that's a blog, podcast, vlog, whatever that might be. But I say the next best thing is being on somebody else's media company. So people
Yeah.
have built podcasts, they have blogs, they have Facebook groups, they have all these different platforms that they're trying to provide value. So what would it take for you to hop on a Facebook group and be able to provide really tremendous value for your ideal clients and customers? So just know that it only takes, really time and your energy and your expertise to be able to do that. So if you can build a media company, but if you don't want to do that now, hop on somebody else's.
Yeah, and that's exactly how Gresh and I connected today. We both have podcasts, and podcasting and being a podcast host is very, very rewarding. Number one, because you get to meet great people and amazing expertise like Gresham, and all the people. You get some free advice. You can ask them anything, and they're very willing to share their knowledge. And it's also great. Uh, an excellent strategy to be a podcast guest, and to share your expertise. And you're exposed to new audiences. There's lots of advantages in there, and people like to hear conversations. And you can take this podcast and slice it up into a whole bunch of different things. You can make reels and clips and quotes and all kinds of things. So as we wrap up, Gresh, how can people learn more? I know you mentioned the podcast. It's I Am CEO Podcast, correct?
Right.
And you have a special gift for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely head over to imceo.co to check out the podcast. Imgresh.com has links to everything that we work on as well too. But special for, everyone that's listening to this, you can go to youareimmediate.company/lead machine growth show. And you can get a copy of the deck that I usually use and lots of other freebies for people as far as a discount on our course and things like that for people that want to learn a little bit more on what it's like to build a media company. So truly appreciate you, Paul,
Well, thank you.
for having me on the show. And at the very least, you get opportunity to connect with awesome people like Paul, which I appreciate. But you also get to share some food analogies as well too, which is
Yeah.
also a really great bonus as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that sweet potato pie.
Yeah.
My my mother-in-law makes a fabulous carrot cake. It's probably one of the best carrot cakes I've ever had. So
Oh.
so we're tracking on a pie. When you said pie, I said I got to dive into pie because I love pie.
There we go. There we go. We'll see each other. I might be in Michigan.
Yeah. All right. Well, Gresh, thanks so much. As we sign off, remember, faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal to the metal. Until next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show, I'm Paul Guyan, and Gresh, thank you so much for coming again. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyan, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.